The orchestra's opening chords echo through the crystal hall, while hundreds of eyes sparkle beneath the diamond chandelier. But in the darkest corner, far from the laughter and toasts, a woman observes everything in silence. Her wheelchair, as discreet as her presence, seems to blend into the shadows. Clara, sister of the powerful Enrique, the man who controls half the city, is the only person at that party no one sees. Not even him. The groom raises his glass in a toast, and his millionaire brother smiles for the cameras, while Clara adjusts the dress no one helped her choose. She was once a ballerina, once soaring across the stage, until an accident stole her dreams and left her trapped in this chair. And now, also trapped in the contempt of those who should love her. The room swirls in a whirl of silk and champagne, but Clara only hears the silence around her. People pass by her, as if she didn't exist. Waiters avoid her side of the table, and even the guest children are warned not to approach. "Don't look, dear. It's a bad omen," a mother whispers as she pulls her daughter by the arm. Clara grips the arms of her chair, her nails digging into her skin. She's grown accustomed to being a ghost, but today, at her brother's wedding, the pain is more acute. Enrique, with his designer suit and wolfish grin, doesn't even glance in her direction. To him, Clara is an annoying detail, a blemish on the perfect image he tries to sell to the world. Suddenly, a movement at the door. Something out of place. Someone who doesn't belong there. Clara turns her head and sees, among the security guards already advancing to intercept her, a child. A thin boy, with patched clothes and eyes too big for his dirty face. He holds something in his hands, something that gleams under the hall lights. And then, without hesitation, he walks straight to Clara. The guests stop talking. The music seems to stop. The boy stops in front of her, extends his hand, and says, in a voice that shouldn't be so firm for someone so small, "Will you dance with me?" The entire hall holds its breath. Clara feels her heart pound, so hard it hurts. And then, for the first time in years, someone sees her. Really? But what happens next? What can such a simple gesture unleash in a world where people like Clara and that boy have no voice? You don't want to miss a second. If this kind of story moves you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Because here, we tell stories no one else has the courage to share. The boy shouldn't be there. Everyone in the room knew that. The security guards were already advancing toward him, faces rigid, hands ready to drag him out like trash. But he didn't back down. Not when his eyes met Clara's. There was something about the child, a determination that didn't match the rags he wore or the dirt marks on his hands. He wasn't a guest. He was nobody. And yet, there he was, reaching out to Clara as if she were the only person in the world who mattered. Clara felt the weight of the silence. All eyes burned into her, but for the first time in years, it wasn't out of pity. It was curiosity, incredulity. Who was that boy? What did he want? She looked at his outstretched hand, small, dirty, but firm. And then, as if waking from a dream, she realized what he held in the other, a pair of worn white gloves, clearly found in some trash can. Dance gloves. Gloves that, once upon a time, she herself had worn. "Will you dance with me?" the boy repeated, his voice trembling now, but without taking his eyes off hers. Clara felt her throat tighten. Dancing. A word that for years had been synonymous with pain, with loss, with everything she could no longer be. But in that moment, it wasn't about what she'd lost. It was about what that boy, his eyes filled with a hope that made no sense, was offering. A chance, not to dance like before, but to dance again, any way she could. She hesitated only a second. Then, with a slow movement, she placed her hand in his. His skin was rough, marked from work, but his grip was gentle. Clara felt her eyes sting, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not now. Not here. The music in the ballroom was a slow, elegant waltz, made for couples who glided across the floor as if the world belonged to them. But when Clara and the boy, Lucas, he whispered his name, began to move, everything changed. It wasn't a perfect dance. It wasn't even a dance in the traditional sense. Clara, her hands resting on the wheels of the chair, guided Lucas's steps as he spun around her like a top, laughing as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And suddenly, the entire ballroom seemed to stop. Someone sighed. Someone held their breath. Someone, deep down, even smiled. Because there, amidst that sea of coldness and hypocrisy, there was something real. Something that neither Enrique's money nor the contempt of high society could buy. But Enrique didn't smile. He watched the scene with pursed lips, his hands clasped at his sides. His wedding, his moment, was being stolen by a dirty child and a sister who should know her place. He made a discreet gesture to the security guards. One of them approached, ready to intervene, but then something unexpected happened. One of the guests' children, a girl in a pink dress, broke free from her mother and ran to Lucas and Clara. Then another, and another. Within seconds, a group of children surrounded them, laughing and clapping, as if this were the most magical thing they had ever seen. And suddenly the ballroom was no longer a place of etiquette and falsehood. It was a place of life. Clara looked at Enrique. For the first time, she saw something beyond indifference in his eyes. She saw anger. She saw fear. Because that moment, that small gesture, was dismantling everything he had built. The image of the perfect man, the perfect family, the perfect world. And Clara, her hands still clasped in Lucas's, understood. That boy wasn't just a child. He was a revolution. But then, the music stopped. Henry stepped forward, his face a mask of suppressed fury. The security guards advanced. And Lucas, as if sensing what was coming, squeezed Clara's hand tightly. "Thank you," he whispered. What would happen next? What would a man like Enrique do to silence the truth that had just been revealed? The entire hall held its breath, waiting. Because everyone knew, some stories don't end happily. Some only begin when the world decides to look them in the eye. The security guards didn't give her a chance. Before Clara could react, rough hands grabbed Lucas by the arms, lifting him into the air as if he weighed nothing. The boy didn't scream, didn't cry. He just looked at Clara with a heartbreaking calm, as if he were already accustomed to this kind of violence. But his eyes, those big, dark eyes, said it all. I knew this was going to happen. Clara felt something inside her break. It wasn't just anger. It was an old, familiar pain, the same one she'd felt when the doctors told her she'd never walk again. The same one she'd felt every time Enrique ignored her, as if she were a mistake to be hidden. Let him go. Her voice echoed through the hall, louder than she intended. People turned, shocked. No one spoke to Henry like that. No one defied his orders. But Clara no longer cared. Enrique approached, his face a mask of disdain, but with a dangerous glint in his eyes. You're making a scene, he whispered, so low only she could hear. As always. He's just a child, Clara replied, her voice trembling but firm. He's an intruder, and you're ruining everything. The security guards are already dragging Lucas toward the exit, but the boy twisted his body, trying to break free. I just wanted to dance, he shouted, his voice thin and broken, cutting through the air like a knife. Clara didn't think twice. With a quick movement, she grabbed the wheel of her chair and moved forward, blocking the men's path. If he leaves, I'll leave with him. The room fell silent. Even the music had stopped. Enrique laughed, a dry, mirthless sound. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, she retorted. For the first time in years. The guests murmured, some scandalized, others fascinated by the unfolding drama. Enrique didn't like scenes. He didn't like losing control. And, above all, he didn't like his sister, the woman he had erased from his life, suddenly becoming the center of attention. You have until the end of the night to retract, he said, each word measured, sharp, or you'll regret it. Clara didn't back down. Where did you find him? She asked, nodding toward Lucas, who was now struggling in vain against the security guards. On the street, where it belongs. He came here because he saw your invitation, Clara said, unsure of how, but certain she was right. In the trash, wasn't it? Because you throw away things you don't want to see. Enrique didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was confirmation enough. That night, after the guests had left and the hall was empty, Clara went to the orphanage. It wasn't hard to find out which one. It was the same one where Enrique donated money every year to clear his conscience, to keep the children out of the public eye. The place was a powder keg, peeling walls, broken beds, children with looks too adult for their age. Lucas was sitting on the floor, hugging his knees. When he saw Clara, he stood up slowly, as if he couldn't believe she was there. "You came," he murmured. "I came," she replied, feeling the lump in her throat. "And I'm not leaving." But Enrique wasn't a man of empty threats. The next morning, an envelope was left on his doorstep. Inside, photos. Photos of Clara with Lucas. Photos of the orphanage. And a simple message: "Stop, or you'll lose everything." Clara held the paper with trembling hands. She knew what it meant. She knew Enrique would do anything to keep his image pristine. But he also knew that, for the first time, he had something to fight for. And then he did what he had never done before. He challenged his brother. Not with words, with actions. But Henry wasn't the kind of man to lose. And Clara, despite all her courage, still didn't know how far he would go to silence the truth. Clara didn't sleep that night. The walls of her room, once a silent refuge, now felt like a prison. Every shadow, every noise, was a reminder that Enrique wouldn't give up. But for the first time, neither would she. Sitting at her desk, photos spread out across the dark wood, Clara picked up the phone. She wouldn't call the police. She knew Enrique had too much influence for that. She wouldn't contact the press. He controlled the newspapers. But there was one thing he couldn't control: the truth. With steady hands, she began typing. It wasn't a complaint. It was a plan. Clara was a lawyer, and although she had abandoned the profession after the accident, her mind still worked as before, sharp, strategic. She knew Enrique's business dealings, the schemes he hid behind donations and smiles for the cameras. And now, for the first time, she had something he couldn't buy: the courage of a child and the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, Clara returned to the orphanage. This time, not alone. She brought with her a hidden camera and a recorder. Not to film the children. That would be cruel. But to document the conditions of the place. The cracks in the walls, the dirty mattresses, the lack of food in the kitchen. And, most importantly, the words of the director, a weary woman who, after much insistence, confessed. "Mr. Enrique donates money every year. But it's always the same amount, regardless of what we need. And he demands that we not talk to anyone about how things really are here." Clara recorded everything. Every word. Every detail. And when she returned home, she sent a copy to a journalist friend, one of the few Enrique couldn't control. "If something happens to me, please share this," he wrote in the message. It wasn't a threat. It was insurance. Enrique didn't take long to react. That same afternoon, while Clara was helping Lucas with his homework at the orphanage, his cell phone rang. It was him. His voice, calm and icy, cut through the air like a blade. "You think you can defy me, little sister? You think these children are worth your comfort?" Clara was unfazed. "I think you're afraid," she replied, looking into Lucas's eyes, who was listening, motionless. "Afraid that the world will see who you really are." Enrique laughed, a hollow sound. "You have no idea what you're capable of losing." "I've already lost everything," she said, and hung up. But Enrique was not a man of empty words. That night, while Clara slept, someone broke into her apartment. They didn't steal anything. They just left a message, a photo of Lucas, taken that same afternoon, with a message scrawled on the back. Next time, it won't just be a photo. Clara woke with her heart in her throat. She knew Enrique wouldn't stop. She knew that if he continued, he would destroy not only her, but all those children. But he also knew he couldn't back down. Not now. It was then that Clara had an idea. A dangerous idea. An idea that could destroy her, or set her free once and for all. She picked up the phone again. This time, she didn't call a journalist. She called Enrique's office. And, in a voice that didn't shake, she left a message, I know about the fraud in your last acquisition. I know about the bribes. And I have proof. If you touch Lucas or any of these kids, I'll send it all to the press. And this time, it won't just be a scandal. It will be the end of you." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Clara hung up, her hands sweaty, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She knew she had just declared war. She knew Enrique wouldn't forgive her. But she also knew that, for the first time in years, she was alive. Now, all that was left was to wait. Wait to see if Henry would back down. Or if, as always, he would choose to destroy everything in his path. And Clara, her eyes fixed on the door, prepared herself for what was to come. Because some battles aren't just about winning. They're about surviving. And she, more than anyone, knew how to do that. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, cameramen, onlookers. Everyone wanted to witness the downfall of the man who, for years, had seemed untouchable. Enrique, seated next to his lawyer, stood erect, his face impassive, as if he could still control the narrative. But Clara, in the front row, never took her eyes off him. There was no more fear. There was no more doubt. There was only the certainty that, for once, justice would not be bought. The judge began to read the sentence. The words echoed like hammer blows. Fraud, bribery, abuse of power. Enrique didn't move, but his fingers, hidden under the table, clenched. Clara closed her eyes for a second, remembering everything that had brought her here. Lucas's look when she'd asked to dance, the children at the orphanage, the years of silence. It hadn't been easy. After that call, Enrique had tried everything. Threats, blackmail, even a suspicious fire at the orphanage. But Clara hadn't backed down. And now, as the judge handed down the sentence, she knew it had been worth it. The sentence was harsh. Loss of assets, a ban from holding public office, and millions in compensation for the victims of his schemes. But the worst part for Enrique wasn't the money. It was the humiliation. It was knowing that, in the end, he had been defeated by someone he'd always loved that underestimated his own sister. When the trial ended, Clara didn't celebrate. She didn't smile for the cameras. Instead, she went straight to the orphanage. Lucas was waiting for her at the door, his eyes shining in a way she'd never seen before. Without saying a word, he extended his hand, and Clara, without hesitation, placed hers in his. "Shall we dance?" the boy asked as he had that night, months ago. This time, there were no security guards to interrupt them. There were no looks of disdain. There was just music, children laughing all around, and the feeling that finally everything was in its right place. In the months that followed, Clara transformed the orphanage. With the compensation Enrique was forced to pay, she renovated the building, hired teachers, and created adoption programs. And, most importantly, she gave the children something they'd never had: hope. Lucas, now with new clothes and a constant smile, had become her shadow. He helped her with everything, from organizing events to teaching the other children to read. And every week they danced, not in the traditional way, not as the world expected, but they danced, and that was what mattered. Enrique, in turn, disappeared for public life. His empire had crumbled, his friends had abandoned him, and he became just another name on a list of convicted criminals. But Clara didn't feel hatred. She felt perhaps pity, because, in the end, Enrique never understood what truly mattered. It wasn't money, it wasn't power. It was the ability to look someone in the eye and know you made a difference. On Christmas Eve, the orphanage was decorated with lights and handmade ornaments. Clara, sitting next to Lucas, watched the children laughing, running, living as children should. Someone turned on the radio, and soft music filled the air. Lucas looked at her, smiled, and extended his hand once more. "You promised you'd always dance with me," he reminded her. Clara smiled, her eyes moist. "And I will always keep my promise." And so, as the snow fell outside and the children cheered, Clara and Lucas danced. Not as the world expected, not as the rules dictated, but as only they knew how, with their hearts. Because some stories don't end with a happy ending. They end with a beginning of hope, of courage, of love. And this was one of them. If this story moved you, if you believe that love and courage can change the world, don't forget to give a like, that's it, subscribe on the channel. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We tell truths that inspire, that move, that make us believe that no matter how dark the path, there is always a light at the end. And that light, it starts with you. Subscribe and be part of this journey. The next chapter could be even more incredible.